Hi, this is Wendy from Willa Workshops and on Instagram at willa.wanders. And I'm here today to start a YouTube series called Mixed Media 101. I've been an artist and a crafter my whole life, but it wasn't until 6 or 7 years ago that I began a very serious exploration into mixed media art. And the reason it took me so long to get into making mixed media art, after I had actually been exposed to it visually, just in magazines many, many decades earlier, is because I looked at it and it looked so intimidating and there was so much going on with it that I just had no idea where to begin. And oftentimes, because I am now someone who's very into this, and I ended up starting a whole online mixed media art school at Willa Workshops. But because I'm so excited about mixed media art, essentially, and because I started this school, people will email me or they'll DM me on Instagram and they'll say, Wendy, I don't know which of your courses to begin with. Like, where do I begin? And I think that that is a really normal question for anyone who's interested in mixed media art. Like, where do you begin? So I've been thinking about this question actually now for years. Where does someone begin? And finally, it hit me that I needed to do this Mixed Media 101 series. And my goal with this is not to give you a project to create, but to share with you the knowledge that I have picked up over the last 7 years in very bite-sized pieces. So I want to say I am not the world's expert on mixed media art. I have only been doing this for, like I said, about 7 years. But I do feel like in that time, I have explored a lot and I have been taught by many of the best teachers in mixed media art. And I'm not going to be sharing with you any of their top secret methods, but I'm going to share with you all of the basics, the things which, had I had access to maybe 30 years ago, the information that if I had access to it, maybe I would have felt more confident in just diving in. This video is an attempt to bring people in who are even insecure or fearful about even just starting with anything, just starting with a class. They just don't feel like they could pick a class. Maybe there's too many classes. So my goal with this is to introduce concepts that are very popular in mixed media art, that are very popular with mixed media artists, tools, materials, ideas, just things that keep coming up over and over and over again, really no matter what mixed media art class you have. And the first concept is this thing called underpaper. Okay, you're like, what? Underpaper? I don't know what that is. So I'm going to break this down for you and I'm going to explain it. So when you make mixed media art, you want to protect your work surface because mixed media art is very, very messy. So I recommend protecting your work surface with something that is durable, not paper, not fabric, but something that's durable. I use this rubber mat. They're called craft mats. They're made by many different brands. You can get them online, and this can get a lot of gunk on there and then easily be wiped off with a wet paper towel or a baby wipe. And mine is in need of some cleaning. I tried washing it in a sink, but really what works best with this is rubbing it with a baby wipe. So that's the first thing, is protect your surface. After you've protected your surface, then the magic is available to you. And that magic is in the form of underpaper. Now, underpaper is another layer of protection for your surface. But the beauty of the underpaper is that it becomes part of your mixed media art. So I'm going to show you an example of an underpaper that I feel is very complete and that I am going to put away for using later in my art. Now this piece of underpaper was actually 3 smaller pieces of paper that I held together with washi tape so that it held together on my surface. And what I was doing when this underpaper was worked on is I was doing a lot of jelly printing, and then I was doing stamping with art foamies. So you'll see that there's a lot of marks that are sort of rectangular or square, and that's because when you do jelly printing, which I'm going to talk about way later in this series, you use something called a brayer, and I will introduce you to all of the tools of mixed media art. But you use a brayer, and when you have excess paint on your brayer, you wipe it off on your underpaper. So the other thing is when you have excess paint or ink on a rubber stamp or a foam stamp like I was using, you can unload the excess paint right on your underpaper. And the absolute magic of the underpaper is that it is the purest form of expression and expressive art and messy art that I am personally able to create. So one of the things that really attracts me to mixed media art is how expressive it can be. And I tend to be kind of tight and perfectionistic. It's just that's how I'm wired as far as making anything goes. I just tend towards the perfection. But I really am attracted to loose, childlike, primitive, just expressive, like raw expression. And I have a really hard time getting myself to express things in a really raw way. So here, I'll give you an example of what I mean. Like this project that I mentioned that we did in Fodder School 4, this is what I naturally do. You know, yes, is there some messiness involved? Yes, but also is there a lot of sort of precision involved? Yeah, there's that too. So I'm trying to balance out my natural inclination of working really precisely with trying to get sort of that feeling of randomness and messiness. And that's the beauty of mixed media art, is you make your own materials, and when your materials have all of this expressiveness baked into them, it's a lot easier to get that expressiveness into the art itself. At least it is for me, and that's why I've really loved my mixed media art journey. So okay, so let's go back to the underpaper. So I'll just review. You want to have something that protects your desk or your tabletop, that is impermeable to paint and ink and all that stuff, unless you don't mind what happens to your tabletop, because that can also be totally fine. But if you don't want to totally ruin your tabletop, you want to have something that is made of a material that's going to be impenetrable. And then what you do is you cover that with paper or even fabric. So in the past, I have taken drop cloth material. So I buy painter's drop cloths, and I will use that as my quote unquote underpaper while I'm making a mixed media art project. And this was a piece of under fabric, essentially, that then after I just tore it into a shape, I did slow stitching and hand embroidery on it. And I have no idea what I will end up doing with this piece. You know, I could probably make a few books out of it. That's probably what this will end up being. Or it's just a wall hanging. At this point, I've just been hanging it on the wall of my art studio. And I love it so much. I did it during the pandemic when I just had lots and lots of time of just sitting in my home and doing nothing. And I was working on the Willa Journals course, and I was doing a lot of hand stitching, and I wanted to just try out different hand embroidery patterns, which was so much fun. And I just can't wait to get back to doing more of this. So having the option of paper or some type of fabric, it could be cotton muslin, it could be really anything. It could even be fabric that has a pattern on it, and then you're adding more marks and you're adding more stuff to it, and it becomes like this bespoke material that's yours and only yours. So it could be fabric, it could be paper, and the paper itself does not need to be so big because you can piece it together with washi tape. So I just want to go through different kinds of paper that I have used as underpaper before I call it the end on this subject. But you could use any kind of packing paper that comes in packages that, you know, when you order things online and you get packing paper, it doesn't matter if there's perforation in it or not. You could just lay a bunch of these sheets on your work surface. Newsprint is very, very popular as underpaper. This newsprint was in a package, so it's got all the crinkly stuff, which is totally fine. But sometimes people will just buy a pad of newsprint. Newsprint, you know, tends to come in really large sheets, so that's really nice as underpaper. And like I said, you can buy this in a pad in any art store. That's a very popular drawing surface for artists. Speaking of drawing, you could use large drawing paper, so you could buy a pad of very large drawing paper. As far as the weight of the paper, the thickness of it, it doesn't much matter. You could use something as thin as newsprint, and you could use something as heavy as a drawing paper. I mean, if you wanted to, you could even use cardstock. If you had like a really large sheet of cardstock, even a really large sheet of watercolor paper, it just, you know, you'll have different uses for it after you've created all of this expressive art on it. But yeah, it could be any weight. But most people keep stuff that is kind of lightweight for this purpose. So here's more packing paper. It doesn't matter what color it is, light, dark. I mean, you're going to be adding so much to it. Oh, I forgot to mention another thing is I just like to keep this on my surface for weeks. So it's not something that develops in a day. It develops over weeks. I might have it on my desk. I might be listening to a podcast and I'll take notes on it. I might be practicing my hand lettering and I will just practice it right on there. If I'm starting a pen and I want the ink to start flowing, I'll start scribbling on it. I mean, you can make marks on this. If you have paint on your hands, you literally, here's some paint that was just on my finger, you know, extra paint. There's no limit to the types of marks that you can make on your underpaper. Whatever just comes out of you, comes out of you. So, okay, back to the different types of paper. So here is some packing paper that is pretty unusual, that just happened to be something that we had a lot of in our house because my daughter was running a little manufacturing operation out of our house many, many years ago, and we got a lot of containers for slime. She was running the slime business, and all of the slime containers came in these very large boxes, and every layer of container had a piece of this white packing paper that separated each layer of containers. So I pretty much have a lifetime supply of underpaper that is perfect for this. But again, at a minimum, if you are making mixed media art and you don't have underpaper, you don't have packing paper, I just recommend maybe going out and purchasing a pad of newsprint or a pad of drawing paper. Or they even sell drawing paper on rolls, like for kids. Like you'll see it in a classroom in a grade school, that those big rolls of paper on a metal cutting thing, that kind of paper would be perfect as underpaper. So before I say goodbye, I'll just show you another piece of underpaper. This one is quite messy, quite gunky, but you may or may not use all of this in your work when you're done. But sometimes you just get like really cool stuff going on, and you don't have to save it all. Also, I recommend working on both sides. You don't have to work on both sides, but I will tell you that when you work on both sides, one of the really nice things about that is when you go to make handmade journals like this one, converting underpaper into pages for a handmade journal is like one of the coolest things that you can do with underpaper, because you are basically loading up your handmade journal with all of this incredible abstract art on it. So this is Underpaper that became Pages. This is Underpaper. This is stuff that I added, but starting like with this Jumpstart paper, that's another name that people call it, but this is an Underpaper. It's got a lot of stamping on it. It's just got a lot of messy mark making. When you start with Underpaper, here, that's actually a messy paper. That's something else. We'll talk about that later. But there were a lot of underpapery type things in here, and you add to them. Here's actually a perfect example. This is newsprint, and I didn't do both sides, but this side here is Underpaper. And it can inform what you're doing. Like, you can be responding to whatever's on that Underpaper. That's something else we'll talk about in this series, about how to know what to do next. It's just responding to what's already there. So I highly, highly recommend, if you are interested in mixed media art and you just feel very overwhelmed and you don't know what to do, follow this series. This is not going to be a series where you're going to come out with a project in the end. This is a series where you're going to come out with knowledge in the end. And I've only been doing mixed media art for about 7 years, so I'm not the world's leading expert, but I do feel like I do have a voice in this world of mixed media art, and a unique sort of way of sharing my love for it that I can share with you. So yeah, so this is it. This is video 1 in my series, Mixed Media Art 101. I hope you'll subscribe and follow along in the series. Have a wonderful rest of your day.